Man, it's been hot out. How hot has it been, Johnny Mac? I was going to do this episode poolside. I was writing the podcast poolside under the umbrella, and the MacBook was overheating. I was like, I got to go downstairs to the basement. Life is hard, isn't it? Stephen Colbert watched the hearings on January 6th, and his writers were on fire. Colbert, he did not call them from a box. He did not call while watching Fox. He did not help out Uncle Sam. His brain is made of eggs and ham. But in his defense, it's possible he forgot the number for 911. Representative Adam Kinzinger referred to Trump's inaction as a stain on our history. Colbert, yes, he is a stain on our history. And thanks to these hearings, we know that stain is ketchup. It was a long night, almost 3 hours, but it wasn't nearly as long as the 187 minutes where the former president did nothing to stop an ongoing insurrection that he created and then watched in all glee as it played out on TV. Let's just hope some of his followers were watching the hearings. Switching topics, the president had a mild case of COVID, and hopefully that's still the case, as I didn't record this 5 minutes ago, you know? Jimmy Fallon said, on the bright side, it's the first positive news Biden's gotten in months. That's great. RuPaul was in for Jimmy Kimmel and said, the big story is that President Biden tested positive for COVID, but according to the White House, Biden is feeling pretty good for a 300-year-old man. It's a little hacky. There are better versions of that joke coming up. Here's one from Trevor Noah as a better version. Get well soon, sir. You made it through the Spanish flu. You can make it through this. Better version from RuPaul. Biden hasn't been this sick since the time he got scurvy on Noah's Ark. Colbert. That's right. COVID isn't going to slow Joe Biden down because he can't get any slower. Seth. President Biden tested positive for coronavirus. Luckily, we've all been keeping our distance. RuPaul. Joe said his symptoms are mild and he'll be back to falling off his bike in no time. Boy, that really sounds like a joke Jimmy Kimmel would have delivered, so you can hear the writer influence there. Hey, we never talk about Dave Chappelle and transphobia, you know? Jay McBride is a trans comic, and Jay tweeted, so far this year, the media has asked me for comments about Chappelle, Gervais, and Louis C.K., but not my own comedy. Using a trans comic as a token for your hit piece is also a type of transphobia. Oh, and my album recording last night went really well. Check out Jay McBride's comedy. It is very funny. Fox News has found this story pretty interesting. What's the story, Johnny Mac? Not everybody listens every day. Okay, real quick. Chappelle was supposed to play a show last Wednesday in Minneapolis, and a couple hours before the show, the theater was like, oh yeah, transphobia stuff. Nope, canceled. And then Chappelle did the show at another theater in town and made some more trans jokes. And he also made an awful joke about monkeypox that I will not repeat. But I did tell you what that was on Friday's episode if you missed it and want to go back. Anyway, Flame Monroe is transgender and told to Fox News Digital that freedom of speech is paramount when it comes to protecting the safest place on earth, the stage. Monroe said, when I grow up, I want to be just like him, meaning Chappelle, because guess what? The show must go on. I don't want to be censored as a comedian. I say some ridiculous things on stage that's hilarious. They may make you think, but what it also teaches you is that I'm a human being. Jamie Masada owns the Laugh Factory in L.A. and said, the comic stage is their sanctuary. We have to protect the First Amendment. We can't dilute it. We have to be able to laugh at ourselves. Masada hopes Chappelle's incident doesn't affect future comics. It's important for the comedians to go out there to express themselves. Comedian Natalie Cuomo told Fox News Digital nobody should be censored and added, the venue already knew. It's not like Chappelle released something new after they booked them. It was already on Netflix. It was already accessible to the public, and canceling a show last minute like that is pretty unacceptable to me. Donnie Zoldan, friend of mine, he owns Stand Up New York and said, I don't feel it's right that people can tell other people what they can and cannot say. If people don't want to support Chappelle, if people are offended by some of his transgender jokes, they don't have to support him. They don't have to watch the Netflix special. They don't have to buy tickets to the show. But to force management who booked him in the first place and put pressure on them to cancel is really unfortunate. Comedians make jokes about everyone. I think 99% of people are not offended by jokes. I think it's the 1% that just have a lot of time on their hands and make a lot of noise. People work. People need to make money. People need to support their families. Like, who has time to try to cancel a comic for jokes? People should lighten up and be whoever you want. Be straight, gay, trans, non-binary. I wish everyone the best. Everyone should be who they want to be. At the same time, you can't tell people what they can and can't say. If you don't like what someone says, don't support them. That said, move on with your life. Worry about yourself. They announced the new James Bond, apparently. We got this news from Joe Pera. He was on Seth Meyers' show. The next James Bond will be played by Joe Pera. At least that's what Joe Pera says. He told Seth Meyers they needed a different angle after Daniel Craig, and they decided, why not a celibate American James Bond? Joe Pera as James Bond lives in Philadelphia, eats boar's head sandwiches for breakfast and lunch, and is learning to play the guitar, and is afraid of dogs. He doesn't want a martini shaken or stirred. He'll take an IPA. Pera shows some clips from his upcoming James Bond film, including his classic catchphrase, "My name is James Bond." Oh, and the working title for the film, James Bond! Exclamation point. So we'll keep an eye on Joe Pera as James Bond. The guys from Please Don't Destroy, those are the funny sketch comedy guys that show up on SNL. Johnny Mac, the whole show sketch comedy. What the hell are you talking about? The pre-recorded. You know the three young guys, they get stuff. Lauren usually bounces their feature. You know who I'm talking about. Ben Marshall, John Higgins, and Martin Harley. Please Don't Destroy. Those guys. You're 6 minutes into a daily comedy news podcast. You know who I'm talking about. Anyway, they're working with Judd Apatow on Untitled Film. Universal Pictures' Untitled Film tackles the story of three childhood friends who live and work together. The trio decides they don't like where their lives are headed. They set out to find gold treasure.
Could you try again?
What? My Apple Watch doesn't like... Apple Watch?
Get that. Could you try again?
No, I'm recording the podcast. Leave me alone, Apple Watch. Did you guys even know my Apple Watch was in my pocket? Why didn't you tell me? Why was it in your pocket? Because I went for a run this morning. When I was done, I must have put it in my pocket. I digress. Where was I? Universal Pictures' Untitled Comedy, starring the Please Don't Destroy guys, who are sketch comedy guys on SNL, which is a sketch comedy show. The film tackles the story of three childhood friends who live and work together. The trio decides they don't like where their lives are headed, and they set off to find gold treasure, rumored to be buried in the nearby mountain. That sounds fun. Let's hit Gossip Corner real quick. Joe Coy. You're in a bad spot, bro. I'm reading between the lines here. TMZ stalked Joe Coy at the airport, and he told TMZ he's back in the friend zone with Chelsea Handler. We learned that last week via Chelsea's Instagram. I hope Joe Coy didn't learn it that way. But he says he's still got love for his ex. He told the TMZ photographer everything's good between him and Chelsea, which is good because he's her opener. Keep an eye on that subplot. And he says they remain great friends. All right, remember last week I had the not really well thought out contest. I had asked you guys who's got the better dating game, John Mulaney or Pete Davidson. Well, coming into the stretch, John Mulaney had a slight edge. And then Tom Rogers went to the Facebook group, which is Daily Comedy News Podcast group. And Tom wrote, "Quantity Pete, quality John." I think I agree. So let's call it a tie, because the contest was awful to begin with. So it's just a tie. Move on. Pretend it never happened. 10 years from now, somebody will go into the back catalog and find that I did this contest back in 2022 and be like, what the hell was that? All right. This week's contest. You're going to vote on Instagram at Daily Comedy News or the Facebook group page, Daily Comedy News Podcast Group. I'm going to ask you, who would you rather have cook for you? Your options, Sebastian Maniscalco or Jim Gaffigan. Sebastian Maniscalco had a cooking comedy series, Well Done with Sebastian Maniscalco. He said, I was looking to get into the cooking space for the last 5 to 7 years. I have a passion for the culinary arts and was like, what could we do? Nothing resonated with me until the pandemic. A buddy of mine, Dominic DiBartolomeo, his business was decimated. He provides meats and cheeses to local restaurants in LA and has his own line of Italian food products. They jumped on YouTube, got a bunch of followers, and then he said, let's do a TV show combining my two passions, comedy and food. All right, that's option 1, Sebastian Maniscalco. Option 2, Jim Gaffigan. He had his YouTube project called Let's Get Cookin'. Gaffigan doesn't make truffle risotto or beef Wellington. He makes toast, hot dogs, and meatball parmesan. Which reminds me, I have half a meatball parm hero in the fridge. I should eat it. Okay. So this week, you go to Facebook group, Daily Comedy News Podcast Group, or Instagram at Daily Comedy News. Who would you rather have cook for you? Sebastian Maniscalco or Jim Gaffigan? Today's Daily Comedy News brought to you by the podcast The Best Song Ever This Week. Every week, music journalist Scott Frampton, he picks a song and he tells you why it's the best song ever this week anyway. This week's The Best Song Ever This Week is Manhattan by Blossom Dearie. Scott wrote me a little note. It says, Blossom Dearie taught Saturday morning cartoon watchers about adjectives. She also taught jazz great Bill Evans a thing or two about piano and played with Miles Davis. Her version of the Lorenzen Hart standard, often known as I'll Take Manhattan, stands out because the singer with the girlish voice could swoon, but was always in on the joke. Check out The Best Song Ever This Week, wherever you get your shows. All right, this week, just for laughs, the Montreal Comedy Festival really gets into swing. I had forgotten, it's the 40th anniversary, JFL. Bruce Hills, I know Bruce, and he's the president up there. Not of Canada, just for laughs. And he said, this is largely about our next 40 years and putting ourselves in a great place for years to come. He's a good guy and is a smart guy. Good hire as the president there. Robin Kazor, who's the VP of Festival, says comedy's always changing. We want to help set the trends from the talent we chose and their style of comedy to our Comedy Pro conference panels, and we're investing in trends that we see. JFL takes over 25 venues, all within walking distance of each other for 2 weeks. Yeah, it's really good. You can bounce around. There'll be 250 to 300 comedians performing, and if the weather holds up for the free outdoor shows, attendance could grow well into 7 figures. Headliners with solo shows include Kevin Hart, Bill Burr, John Mulaney, James Acaster, Amy Schumer, Hassan Minhaj, Gerard Carmichael. Variety's 10 comics to watch, including Moses Storm, Rosebud Baker, and Jay Jordan. Shows curated and hosted by Patton Oswalt, Chelsea Handler, Ronnie Chang. You hear me? This thing is awesome. You should go. If you're going, hit me up on the socials. We can have a beverage on Wednesday. And don't forget the big awards. The Comedy Person of the Year is Amy Schumer. Stand-Up Comedian of the Year, Hassan Minhaj. Breakout Comedy Star of the Year, Taylor Tomlinson. She gave some quotage and said, I'm honored. Getting new faces at JFL was such a huge deal for me when I was younger. It's cool to be coming back to the festival at a different stage in my career. Comedy Special of the Year, Gerard Carmichael's Rathaniel. And Just for Laughs themselves is being recognized. They're getting a star on Canada's Walk of Fame. Canada's Walk of Fame Gala returns December 3rd with a star-studded in-person event at Beanfield Center in Toronto. It'll be broadcast on CTV at a later date. Let me check my bookmark here and see who's playing tonight. Atsuko Atsaka playing at 7 o'clock. Tommy Tiernan also at 7 o'clock. He's really good. Randy Feldface. I'm increasingly obsessed with Randy Feldface. 10 o'clock, Reese Nicholson. Now, if you look ahead to tomorrow, you can have all those names plus Deanne Smith, Best of the Fest. Those are two different things. I mean, Deanne could be. Actually, Deanne can't be part of the Best of the Fest because her show is at the exact same time as Best of the Fest. She might be awesome, but she's not Best of the Fest. Rachel Feinstein, also not Best of the Fest for the same reason I just explained. Salman Giorgio, Preacher Lawson, Rosebud Baker, Neil Brennan. Yeah, Tuesday night really starts to pick up. Wednesday, there's like too many things to do, but I'm going up for new faces. That's why I go, so that when I tell you, hey, so-and-so is really funny, like you don't need me to tell you, you know who's really funny is Chris Rock. You know that. Hey, you know who's really funny? Patton Oswalt. You know that. I like to keep my eye on the up-and-comers so that I can do what I do here. And that is your comedy news for today. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your shows. See you tomorrow.